Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse here of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. I have a special guest who is in a very specific area of land investing, specifically cold calling. I've had a cold call guest before, but Joe here, I met him last year. He went through the Dirt Hacker Challenge with me, and it's great to see how much he was, experimenting, trying different things, and that led to another thing, and here he is now. He's an expert in cold calling, specifically for land. So I'm sure you're going to get tons out of this episode here. So enjoy this episode here with my good friend, Joe Roberts. All right, how's it going, everybody? I've got Joe with me. Joe, how are you doing?
Great. Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, we met like last year. You came out to the Dirt Hacker Challenge that we were doing last year. And now here you are. Things have completely skyrocketed for you. I'm so excited to just jump in your story and talk about what you've been up to. And but before, let's talk about tell us your journey as how, if you can give us a Cole's notes of how you sort of got into land and what you've been doing since then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely been a whirlwind year. It's been almost exactly a year since we met in February of 23. I'd been in land since fall of 21 at that point. But, so February of 23, I was transitioning out of the Marine Corps. I was on terminal leave. And as a result, I had just hired my first VAs for my land business. And I was really looking to start scaling since it was going to be, well, it is, my full-time job, no longer getting that government paycheck. So, I was looking to build, my systems and processes as it was going from more or less a side hustle that I had done well, active duty in the Marine Corps, into full-fledged business. I need to support my 5 kids and wife. So that was a year ago. And I think I remember talking with you. I definitely know I talked about it in the group, but I was searching for, I'd been searching for a few months for an additional lead generation source off of, instead of direct mail, at the time I was looking for something to really complement direct mail, because I was no longer seeing the returns I had seen like my first year or so in the business. Sure. And at the time, actually, I did the Dirt Hacker Challenge with you guys. I was in the process of doing some testing with cold calling internally, using one of my VAs and myself to cold call. So also, I did that for a few weeks, and I realized, hey, this isn't really, it's working, but it's not efficient. And I didn't particularly like spending all my time cold calling. And so I tried to find a real estate cold calling company that I felt would do exactly what I wanted for my land business. Couldn't find one. So I launched my own cold calling company, Land Caller, and kind of built that as I was also scaling my land business up and, adding employees to my land business and that sort of thing. So over the past year, it's definitely been a whirlwind. I've basically been building my land business up while simultaneously building this service business for land investors, which of course my land business was the first client of it. And, discovering a lot about cold calling as a lead generation method along the way. So.
And that's what we're gonna dig into with you today. And I've had somebody on in the past, talk about cold calling, but you're coming from a land perspective, so I'm really excited to talk to you about that. But you started off doing it yourself. So what are some of the before you started building out your service? And of course, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But what are some of the big things that you learned early on doing it yourself?
I mean, so when I was doing it myself, it was, first of all, very, very rudimentary. And what I mean by that, it was like, I had markets that I knew well from mailing that I had bought and sold a number of properties in. I just knew I wanted to be in these markets. And so, and when I say it was like literally like find individual properties that I was like, oh yeah, I'd like that in the GIS. Use a free skip tracing software to find a number, and then like dial them from my personal phone. Like that's how it started. And the first thing that really like stuck out to me about it was um like, oh, I'm getting leads from people that never responded to mailers. That I knew had
Wow.
gotten mailers because I had sent them mailers, and but they were picking up the phone and talking to me. And so I remember being like, wow, that's weird. Like, I've sent these people blind offers, I've sent neutral letters, I've sent ranged offers, and I never got a response. And now the very first time I try to call them, they're picking up the phone, and then I'm under contract a week later. And so it's like, okay, there's like this subset of owners out there that
Right.
are not going to respond to mailers, and they're not going to respond to texting. And it's a Venn diagram, right? Like there's overlap amongst all of them, but there's definitely some there that the only way you might get them is cold calling. And so that kind of like that realization that sparked, it was like, okay, like have I found like a strategic advantage within the land flipping niche here? And I
Yeah.
felt like I had.
So, I guess why did you decide to explore uh, um, cold calling? As this next channel that you wanted to tap into. Why not mass texting? Why not ringless voicemail? What led you to cold calling?
No, so a few things. So first of all, I did do texting. At the same time I was cold calling, I was also experimenting with texting.
Mm.
Um, and I picked texting and cold calling as kind of the two that I would try to, as I was still mailing at the time, to discover. What led me to cold calling initially was essentially going back, looking at, okay, who are the people that respond to my mailers?
Mm.
Who is my standard seller of properties that I'm buying from? They're older in general. Some of like they're responding to mail, which like Gen Z and Gen X don't. So like they're older, they're more used to like older traditional forms of communication. And I had plenty of instances in the direct mail game where it's like, okay, like we get the contract, maybe we have to adjust the price or something for my blind offer, and I try to go send them something for e-signature, and they're like, oh, I don't have an email, right? Or I'm like trying to text with them, and I'm getting back in touch with them, but it's only via landline. So it's like, okay, maybe my target seller is not going to respond to SMS, or at least a subset of that population is not going to respond to SMS. So to me, it was like, it felt like a good fit with the type of people I had been buying land from, and a better fit overall than texting in a lot of ways. Texting definitely has its place. But there is something to be said for knowing exactly who you're going after. So, and then the other thing that kind of, and I wouldn't say I knew this at the time, but I discovered pretty quickly, was that cold calling is like well established, right, in the US. Like it's been a thing for decades, probably since phones were invented. But in terms of specifically when you get into like regulations and the laws surrounding it, and the how the industry is regulated, it's kind of like all the ground rules have pretty much been laid. And yes, there's from time to time like kind of tweaks and stuff, but um, everybody kind of knows the where the fences stand and like what you can and can't do. And it's not some new technology. There's new technology that comes and changes it some, but it doesn't change like the name of the game. Mass texting and ringless voicemail are still very much, even though it feels like, especially to like millennials and younger, it's been around forever. In reality, as a lead gen marketing method, it hasn't, especially when you compare to like how government bureaucracy catches up to what markets do. And so I think we saw this honestly with like this past year with texting, is that the technology always shoots ahead of the government, and then the government catches up. And what I realized was like, there is the significant, like as I started to like really dig into like what was happening, I realized that there's probably and it was honestly, I was accurate in my assessment that there's probably some significant changes coming to how we conduct texting and ringless voicemails the legality of it or the regulations that'll be put in place,
Mhm.
um, just because of that natural like catch up from the government to what the market's doing. And
Right.
there, you don't really see that as much with cold calling because it has been so established.
Right. Right. It's just a much more, I guess, mature channel of marketing. I want to ask you something that, like, this is me being selfish, but just a really question out there. Well, I've hopped on a call, hopped on calls before, and sometimes you end up getting somebody who just is sharing their life story with you, and it's just going and going and going. I feel like you guys in the cold calling area, you guys would know how to handle. And how do you? This is just one thing that always sticks out to me about phone calls that I always remember. Like, oh gosh, I have to go through their life story with them. How do you guys handle that? I know it's sort of a random question, but it's
No,
sometimes.
it's actually a great question. So what I would say is like there's a big difference between that kind of call on a cold call and that kind of call with a lead. Okay. I am perfectly happy to hear your life story about the land that and anything else you want to talk about if I think that there's a nice deal waiting for me at the end as I've built some rapport. And even if it's going to take me 5 calls, if I if there's a nice contract to be had at the end of it, let's do it. I'll learn your kids names and let's get down. And I've landed enough contracts at this point to know that is very viable way of yes, it's not as simple as like, hey, I send you a piece of mail, you send the contract back signed, and we're off to the closing attorney. But in a lot of ways, it can be more lucrative because people will do deals with people they like. The cold call is where that's a big part of what I didn't like about me doing cold calling, and because like there is a lot that it can be very time intensive, not just the dialing and the thing, but like these conversations. Like you get somebody on the phone that just wants to talk, and you don't know at the beginning of that conversation, like, is this going to turn into a good lead, or am I wasting the next 10 minutes of my life listening to this person? And then it's like, no. So um, that played a big factor in me wanting to outsource, to be frank, because if somebody
Mhm.
else is doing that and I just get to see a warm lead on the other side, and now this lead is potentially turning into a contract, I'm much more inclined to give in my consideration, my more valuable time to that conversation. But yeah, I mean, it's the name of the game in this, in specifically in this like lead gen method. Like you need to be ready to talk to people if you're doing your own cold calling. uh yeah, you need to be a conversationalist, that's for sure.
So, what do you ask? What do you when you're cold calling, what do you collect for that initial call? Like, we don't need to role play here, but if somebody wanted to attempt this themselves and explore cold calling and kind of go through that, path and understand what it's all about, what would you suggest for somebody to ask, and what do you do on that initial call?
Great question, because I see this with people that get get into cold calling for the first time, and they want to treat it as like a letter, more like a letter that gets read on the phone, more or less, right? Like they first of all want to tell their life story, everything about their business. Oh, we close fast, we do all cash, we'll pay your closing costs, like kind of like whatever they've spent all this time like coming up with. It's like, this is the great letter, like this is just, oh, that's my script for a cold call. No, not the case. You Somebody that is getting a letter is opening it and reading it at a time of their choosing when they have the time to do so. That's not what's happening with a cold call. You are, by definition, calling them out of the blue and talking to them about maybe a property they haven't thought of in a long time, or it may be a pretty inopportune time, like they're trying to drop kids off for school or whatever it is. So you've got to get to the point. You've got to immediately establish who you are and why you're calling in the first 5 seconds of the call. So,
Mm.
hey, this is Joe Roberts. I'm a land buyer in North Carolina. I was calling about your property in Macon County. I'm looking to buy properties in this area. Do you have any interest in selling? Like you are making a statement that you want to buy their property within the first few seconds of that call, because A, it's more efficient for your time. if they are immediately not interested. And then B, you are more likely to generate a positive response when you're not wasting their time up front. So that's the first thing, is you got to get straight to the point. The second thing is you've got to understand that you don't need to get all this, like, you don't need to completely qualify a lead in your first call. That's another thing that we see, like a land caller, because we build, essentially every client is in some way their script is customized. We have standard questions and stuff, but I would say more than half of our scripts have quite a few customizations to fit their specific strategy that they're looking for. And what we see a lot is people come in, they're like, okay, here's like the 15 questions I want asked of every lead before it gets into my CRM. And it's not a good way of doing, it's not good for this lead gen method, because rarely does somebody have the time when we're calling them, or the inclination to go answer 15 questions about a property, right? And you're asking them about, when was the last perk test? Have you had it perk tested? Is it, all these due diligence questions, first of all, lots of which can be done by a VA with internet access, with a couple minutes of research. So you really want to stick to, like, you want to aim for like 3 to 5 minutes on your first call. That's kind of the sweet spot. Obviously, you'll get those talkative folks that are going to keep you on longer. Mm-hmm. But if you shoot for that as your goal, you're going to capture the most amount of potential leads for the people that just don't have the time right then, or they're just an impatient type of person. So what that looks like, it's about 4 or 5 questions. So you want to be 4 to 6 questions. You want to be pretty choosy about what you're deciding is valuable information on that first call. What I've found is more valuable than simple due diligence questions is open-ended questions that kind of get them talking, that give me clues into either their motivation level, their pain points, and or anything that I can use in negotiations later on. So like getting them to give you a number first, right? That's like negotiations 101, is get the other side to say a number first. So that's a question in my, standard cold call is like, what are you hoping to get for this property? So it already arms me for potential follow-up calls with a number if I can get that.
So you collected some of that information, and then how do you get them to move forward? Do you book for another call? Do you ask for another time where you can talk more about it? What's typically the way that you can sort of secure the next call?
Yeah, booking again is kind of hit or miss in terms of like getting them to agree to, let's book a call for tomorrow afternoon. I mean, that's definitely I would say you have the most likely chance of having that call, but the least likely chance of them agreeing to like your specific time on the call. So what we typically do is just, okay, thanks for the information. We're going to take this and try to generate an offer. If we have any other questions, we'll give you a call back, or we'll call back with an offer. How does, or what is a good time in the next day or two for you? Or do you have a preferred time callback? They say, okay, yeah, afternoons anytime. Like, okay, great. I'll make a note of that. We'll give you a call back in the afternoon in the next day or two. Expect that to come from a, XYZ area code or something like that. So good way to kind of set expectations for rough time of day and date, but you don't have to lock yourself in case maybe due diligence takes a little bit extra long, and then set expectations so that they kind of know what area code you're going to be calling back from is also a good method.
Awesome. Thank you for breaking that all down and sharing some of your insights and experiences with how you go about especially that initial cold call, and how do you move over to the next step. Now, what would you say is something you learned that you never realized about cold calling that you came around to learning about? Is there something that sort of took you by surprise as you were sort of getting started, or a few months down the road? Did something unlock? Did some sort of realization? Any surprises?
Yeah, I guess one kind of surprise or realization that I don't think I had before is that, so there's this idea that you can't create motivation, that you can only catch people at the right time.
Mm.
Um,
I
what
like that.
has
You can't create
like
motivation, but you got to catch them at the right time.
Yeah, well, that's the idea, right? But
Yeah.
what I've discovered over the last year
Mm.
is that that's not entirely true.
Mm.
I would say that that's still obviously the majority of situations.
Mm.
But what I've discovered is that like you can create motivation in that like you can plant seeds and you get to bear the fruit that comes from that seed planted when you can establish a relationship with somebody. And you can maybe you don't somebody says, well, you're not creating motivation. Okay, maybe I'm not, but I'm getting them to a point where they had no intention of selling and now they're selling to me. So to me that is kind of creating motivation.
Mm.
Or it's at least creating a deal where motivation didn't previously exist.
Right.
And so, we've seen really good success with much better success with our follow ups because than we did with mail because
Mm.
we've talked to these people on the phone. And yes,
Mm.
we planted seeds, and there's an aspect of like, yeah, actually, you're right. Haven't thought about that property in 2 years, and I'm not doing anything with it, and I am paying taxes. And then who are they going to start talking to about it? Well, the person that's already on the phone with them and the person that's following up with them on a regular basis that they've already talked to on the phone. So um, I would say that that's kind of like the lesson that I've come to gather over the past
Mm.
year that, as a younger land flipper or previously where it was like, yeah, like you just got to catch them at the right time, right place. And if you're lucky enough to be there, then, and you're the first one in the door, then, you could get the deal. Whereas like, I think, and I think it's a little bit specific to cold calling because
Mm.
there's that personal connection. Like, you don't really have a personal connection with like, you know, a phone number that appears in an SMS on your phone. It's like, okay, so what? He said it's Joe Roberts and I'm a local land buyer. Like, you don't care, right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't matter. And
Right.
you're not gonna remember that they texted you. But if you and I have had maybe 2 or 3 conversations about your land
Mm.
and you're not ready to, we don't go under contract this month, but I follow up in 2 months and I follow up in 3 or 4 months, like, I am putting deals under contract in January right now that we first made contact in May, June, July, right?
Right.
Um, and so that's a long way of kind of and convoluted way of saying I don't think that the old mantra of you can't create motivation is necessarily true.
Awesome. I want to dive into a little bit of the numbers, just kind of getting an understanding. I mean, the question I had written down here was like, on average, how long is that call? You mentioned you like to keep that first initial call between 3 to 5 minutes, get what you need, and then get back to them after with that offer. But the let's say the follow up calls after that. I mean, do the times typically vary? I mean, when you're sort of managing somebody who wants to do cold calling, what do you sort of put down a limit as to how long people can talk, or do you encourage lengthier talks, and what does it look like on average?
On average, it's a little bit longer, but it also depends on how much we've been able to do in due diligence. And
Mm.
it depends a lot on the seller themselves.
Right.
So, a lot about this business is being able to adjust to the type of person you're talking to on the fly, so very good social skills are extremely valuable when
Right.
all your negotiations are taking place and discussions are taking place over the phone. So I would say it tends a little bit longer, but it could also be shorter. It could be like, hey, we've got 2 or 3 quick due diligence questions asked. This person is not really a chatty person. They might be a motivated seller and they might really want to sell. They're just not the type of person that wants to spend 10 minutes on the phone with a stranger. So you get to
Sure.
the point. So on average, it's probably seven minutes or so. I don't put any limit on myself or anybody else.
Right.
Ultimately, if there's a deal to be had at the end of it, if it's like
Right.
pretty clear that like, okay, this is not, we're gonna be too far apart on price. Like, yeah, we try to
Sure.
wrap it up. But if I see a potential deal, like, yeah, I'll stay on the phone. That's going to set me apart from the guy sending them mail 3 times a year. So
Sure. So doing the math here, average calls per hour, we're looking like you probably do 20 calls an hour for the cold calling side of things. Is that right? 15, 20?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like there's a big difference between doing this yourself and doing this
Yeah.
like with a professional cold caller, right?
Yeah.
So because uh, a dialer using a power dialer, um, and somebody who's just going, next call, next call, next call,
Yeah.
versus you're picking up your handset and you're dialing in, even if you've got
Yeah.
a skip trace list in front of you.
Yeah.
Software obviously makes things faster. So yeah, I mean, I would say probably when I was doing it, I was probably averaging like 10 calls an hour or something around there.
Yeah.
But yeah, 20 calls an hour is definitely well within the realm of what a professional cold caller should be doing. I mean, our cold callers in our call centers are typically having between 200 and 400 contacts per day. So that's somebody who picks up the phone. Now that could be for 5 seconds. They're like,
Right.
I'm not interested in putting it down, or it could
Right.
be a 10-minute conversation. But they're talking to a person 200 to 400 times a day in that range.
Not really cold calling, but in terms of follow up, like on average, how much follow up do you see in order to say closing the deal? Just on average, a number that you can pull out of your head. Is there any number?
I mean, maybe two 1.8 something, somewhere between 1 and 2 calls is probably the average you get.
Okay.
It depends
Well,
on your strategy. Like as we've gotten more comfortable, my land business team, with cold call leads,
yeah.
we're much more adept and agile at adapting to the person we're on the phone with. So if we feel like, we come armed to the very first conversation ready with an offer, but
Right.
we don't necessarily give it unless um A, it really seems like they want it, or B, it seems like it might be difficult to get back in touch with them if we've had a hard
Mm,
time getting back in touch with them despite kind of setting those expectations.
mm,
But I mean, there's those deals that just take. I've got a deal now. I was just telling somebody about this earlier today. I think we made contact with this lady at the end of November. I really want this deal. There's about 150K to be made here, and
wow.
she just won't sign the contract. We've agreed verbally. Every week is a different excuse. Maybe I'll never get signed, but at this point, if she's gonna sell it anyway, it's gonna be to me, because like we're basically friends now. I know all of her kids' names. Like I know where they live, and it's just like, yeah, once a week, once every other week, it's give a call. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, great. You ready to sign? No, okay. Well, how
Wow.
the kids doing? And, so I mean, that one, we're probably honestly on call like 15 or something.
Wow.
But there's a big payoff at the end if I can get that deal under
Right, right,
contract.
right,
So,
right, right.
yeah.
That's so funny. Um, what should people expect in terms of cost per lead?
Um, cost per lead is going to be above, it's going to be more expensive than texting.
Yep.
I think it's a higher quality lead than texting.
Yep.
It's going to be a lot cheaper than mail.
Hmm.
Cost per lead is going to vary really widely depending on how you set this up, right? So,
Right.
um, when I'll use Land Caller as like an external agency example. So, our cost per lead is typically about 60 to 65% cost savings over a similar sized list of mail.
Got
Um, and so, it comes out to around 30 cents per lead. That's all in with data and every, like, pulling the records and everything else.
wow.
Um, the Doing it yourself, you obviously gain, you can make that a little bit cheaper, but not a whole lot cheaper if you want to like really like do it with like the software, right? So like
Okay.
a power dialer,
Yeah.
a good skip tracer. Skip tracing matters so much
Right.
in this business.
Yeah.
Making sure you're doing a TCPA scrub to keep yourself, protected, that sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
um, there's some costs that you're never going to get cheaper doing it, some kind of a floor to it. But
Right.
I would say if you're doing it yourself, maybe you get that down to 25 cents ish,
Yep.
potentially, a record per record.
Yep. Hmm.
So that's kind of like per record contacted. And then the lead flow tends to be about the same that you see from direct mail. So, 10,000 records, we average about at land caller about 70 to 75 leads off of an initial list of right around 10,000 records, but that's after those records that have been skipped. So there's, a certain percentage there that don't ever get contacted, but just like mail, there's a certain percentage that never get delivered. So, and it's
Right.
a similar percentage. So,
Right. Okay. So one of the things about Joe is that he has come through and come onto my radar because he joined the Dirt Hacker Challenge last year. And the Dirt Hacker Challenge is a 5-day challenge with myself on really going through the framework and building a blueprint of how do you put your business on autopilot, getting processes in place. How do we hire? How do we grow? How do we scale? This has nothing to do with tech, about everything to do with getting clarity on your business and getting processes behind that. And this is what I run every month. It's called the Dirt Hacker Challenge. In fact, if you head over to dirthackerchallenge.com, sort of make this a bit of a no-brainer for you. Check it out. I run this every month. And again, Joe was part of this early on when I ran it back in 2023. I'm still running this. I've improved on it so much more since then. And so if you're interested in understanding, even as a solopreneur, how do I start planning for the upcoming months of when I bring my first hire on, when I start documenting things for my team, how do I actually do that? How do I build processes? You've seen it done with tech businesses all the way down to things like McDonald's and Starbucks. They are able to scale because they've built in repeatable processes. So I run this every month. Head over to dirthackerchallenge.com. If you want to join it, it happens every month. It's a 5-day challenge, 1 hour every day. Make this no brainer. So check it out. Head over to dirthackerchallenge.com. Anyways, let's continue this show here with Joe Roberts. You mentioned a few times, and just for listeners, so they understand, what is a power dialer, and can you give people an example who want to perhaps try it themselves and see what cold calling is about? What is a power dialer, and do you have an example of one?
yeah. So a power dialer is just a software that allows you to cold call at scale. So as opposed to, your Google Voice number, your open phone number, where you're tapping in each number and then putting, calling. A power dialer is just a calling software. There's certain things that you have to have in it in order to stay compliant with the TCPA if for that. But what it essentially allows you to do is to upload a list, and although a person still controls it, you can just dial a lot faster. So some of the examples are like Call Tools, Ready Mode are these softwares that that allow you to essentially work through numbers a lot quicker. It's not completely automatic. There's still a person there controlling it, but it is a lot more efficient than like an open phone.
Gotcha. Okay. Stepping towards you. What's it like to run a land business and a land calling service, or just a service business, running multiple businesses? What's that like?
Jesse, I should be asking you this. No, I think you know exactly what it's like. It's so first of all, it's very nice in the sense that like it's my one business was built to support my other business, so they're
Yeah.
complementary, and um, it allows me to focus in the same industry basically, in complementary ways, right? Because as I'm discovering things in my land business, I'm applying those lessons learned back over to land caller, and vice versa. I'm also able to give those insights to our clients and everything else. um,
Mhm.
my land business has not grown nearly as quickly as it could have if I
Mm.
had not spent. I mean, I have a partner with land caller, 50-50 partner. He's the COO, so he's more the day-to-day obviously stuff. And so I definitely could not have grown land caller by myself without him. I mean, that's a given.
Right.
But land caller definitely took up the majority or a majority of my time. I was able to do that though, and I mean, my land business did 7 figures this year, so it's not something to scoff at. It's it's definitely not on the probably most of your guests are doing a lot more volume in their land business than I do. But I was, especially since I didn't get out of the Marine Corps till April, I was very happy with seven figures in
That is awesome.
2023. I wouldn't have been able to get to seven figures there had I not, established a team, systems and processes, good
Yeah.
CRM. Shout out to Pebble. Still use it even though I don't mail anymore. It's a great CRM. And been able to kind of gain some efficiencies with Land Caller being the one providing my land company leads. Moving into 2024, as Land Caller is kind of maturing and we're hiring out for more positions, promoting from within, and I'm able to kind of take a small step away. I will focus hopefully back on my land business and continue to grow it. But my land business more or less just kind of ran on autopilot in 2023
That is
I didn't
amazing.
really do much like expansion.
So there you have it, guys. Those of you guys listening, trying to get your land business up and going and thinking, hey, can I actually do this? Look at Joe. He has built his land business, killed it last year, and is not only killing that, but also killing his service business as well, or also focusing on something else as well. So amazing, amazing, amazing. That's such a crazy win, and congrats on that, Joe. I genuinely mean that because it's not easy to run one business, and
No, it's not.
kudos, kudos to you for that. I admire that very much. Okay, I got a couple more questions here for you. I want to talk a little bit about your service, and so how can people engage with you? So landcaller.com, they can find you there. Is it specifically only for land? Can they use it for houses? Can they use it for other things?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So when you get down to it, cold calling's cold calling. All of our cold callers, we don't hire them unless they have previous real estate cold calling experience. So
Wow.
we have a caller that is guaranteed. We have multiple callers that have done whatever asset class you're wanting. We don't advertise that
Mm,
necessarily. We do call
mm,
for other asset types.
yeah.
It's almost exclusively somebody who we're calling for their land campaign and they're like, hey,
Mm,
I also do houses, or I also want to
right.
buy, hey, I want to buy a self-storage facility this year. And so rather than have a client have to go search elsewhere for another, it's like, hey, we can do that for sure.
Yeah.
So but we honestly we want to stay honest to our roots, because we built this because it didn't exist in the land community. And we felt like there was a need
Definitely.
for it, and there
Hmm.
was the land investor community is a small community, but it's a lot of very passionate people. And
Yeah.
I mean, as building a CRM built for land investors, it's cool to be able to just build something for the people that you interact with
Yeah.
in this industry. So yes, we'll call for other stuff. It's easy to do. We have a caller, I'm sure, for any asset class, but you know we are first and foremost vacant land, and that's where we focus. That's almost all of our training is focused towards getting leads in that space.
That's so awesome. Now, I'm sure you have a process of how you get people in, but before that, I want people to know. I want to know a little bit more about you, Joe. I know we spoke last year, and we kind of touched bases at the end of the, last year as well. And so I have this thing called the quickfire round. So I'm gonna give you some questions here. I'd love to learn a little bit more about Joe, the guy behind Land Caller, the land investor. You mentioned you have 5 kids. Holy smokes. I don't know how you do it. You
we
got out of the Marine
we
Corps. But
homeschool
anyways,
too.
outside of land, what do you like doing? Outside of business, outside of work and land, anything land related, what do you like doing?
uh so anything outdoors, hunting, fishing, or hiking are huge loves of mine. Anything with my kids. We homeschool our kids, so we get to kind of
Wow.
do a lot with them.
Mm.
I love to travel. 2023, the majority of the year, we've been on the road in a fifth wheel traveling
Oh
around
my
the
goodness.
U.S. So I think we've been to. So we left North Carolina. I got out of the Marine Corps in April. We left North Carolina in May. We've got a 43-foot fifth wheel. We've
Oh
been
my
to
goodness.
25 something states so far, all around the U.S., just on the road, staying in campgrounds. So love to travel. Love to be outdoors.
You are living the life, Joe. You are living the you are wow, you are making probably a lot of people salivate, and the freedom, it's so funny, the freedom that you've crafted for yourself, and doing what you love. So okay, what's your biggest pet peeve?
Uh, Biggest pet peeve is just lack of follow through. I would say, like as a
Mhm.
Marine, like everything is, you say you're going to do it, you get it done.
Yeah.
And so whether that's, obviously everybody falls to that own temptations, whether that's within myself when I recognize it,
Yeah.
employees, potential clients, like just, um, I like things to come to conclusion, whether that's like a
Right.
yes, a no, I couldn't get it done because of this, but just follow through. That's, for me and myself, like I have a lot of things going on clearly. Like, so I have to catch myself too, is like, am I capable of following through on everything that I've committed to, whether that's my family, my businesses, and everything else.
Sure, sure. I love that one. What is a bad habit you're working on?
Um, I mean, I would say it kind of dovetails off that last point of like shiny object syndrome, like wanting to do too much
Yeah.
and stretching myself too thin. So a bad habit is I get something to a phase where it's like it's running well, and then it's like I've got the next thing, right? It's like, all right, what's next? And so I need to learn to like take some time to just, you know, take some wins, rest, refit,
Yeah,
and then before moving out on something else. So,
got you. One more here. Do you read? I've got a book question.
yeah, I read a lot.
Okay, so if you can recommend one book that you've read recently, what would it be and why?
Hmm. Um, Man, that's a good question. Uh, I mean, first of all, this is like not a business book or anything. It's just a
Yeah,
fantastic
fiction,
literature.
nonfiction, yeah.
It's probably my favorite book is Count of Monte Cristo. Um, I and if you want to like draw some good business or like life advice from that book, it's the importance of like perseverance. So that's my favorite book of all time. I'm reading it again now, and it's a fantastic piece of literature. It's obviously complete fiction, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
some great stuff in there. In
Awesome.
terms of business books I've read, man, I just I'm in the process of finishing E Myth again
Yeah,
right now
yeah.
because that's always a good one
Good
to
one.
kind of reread and reorient yourself as things
Uh-huh.
grow and you move into different phases of business and life and stuff. So.
Yeah, yeah. I love that one too. Awesome. Joe, who would you recommend to have on this podcast and why? You see, this is how I get my guests.
Who would I recommend to have on your podcast?
Yeah,
Oh man,
I've been on.
I feel like your bench has been really impressive. The land community is pretty small, so at some point you start to definitely run out of people that are just at least just focused on land.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Man,
Nobody comes to mind. It's not a big deal, but
I'm just trying to think of somebody you haven't had because like every time I come up with a name, it's like, oh no, they've been on there. So um, you have had JT Olmsted.
I, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, this is gonna be embarrassing. I've talked to JT quite a bit, and I think we're trying to line him up.
All right. Well, if you haven't
So
had JT,
there you go.
then you
Yeah,
need JT.
yeah,
Um,
right. I finally got
because
to meet him out in Korea last year. But yeah, an awesome, awesome guy.
yeah,
Okay,
uh,
thank you, thank you. I think that was recommended a few times, and I feel like I've had JT on already. So JT, if I had you on, I'm so sorry. I don't these things. I do so many that I now I'm on so many calls, but I feel like I haven't actually had you on yet. But
if you
awesome.
haven't, also, JT always seems to be the type of guy that's like pushing the envelope. So even if you had him on, he's probably doing something new or has some new
Yeah,
insight.
right,
So,
exactly,
and your
exactly.
land loans is obviously a fantastic resource for
Yes,
folks.
yes. I think that's what we were
So
supposed to talk about. Thanks for reminding me on that one. Awesome. Well, you've been awesome to interview. Again, Joe, how can they reach out to you? Is it just head over to landcaller.com? What should they expect as the next step here?
yeah, if you're interested in outsourcing cold calling as a lead gen method, landcaller.com, you can get on there, learn a little bit more about us.
Yeah.
You can book a call. For now and for the foreseeable future, you're going to be booking a call with me because I like to know all of our clients and, put a face to a name. And we're very focused on building. It's not for the masses. It's going to be, we're focused on building a very customized experience to professional land operators who understand the value we bring in terms of regular, consistent lead flow, people that know the industry, people that use our own product and stand behind it. So for that reason, we're very involved. Every client gets a dedicated Slack channel, and I'm in that channel so they can reach out to me at any time. So yeah, if you're interested in chatting about how we could potentially do lead gen for you, landcaller.com, and you can book a call on there.
Awesome. Joe, thank you so much for hopping on a call with me here and sharing your journey and what you've done and all the success you've had. And I hope that really inspires others to see that this is a very possible to build a dream lifestyle and also buy a giant RV and drive around the country.
That's right. So, it is possible. Absolutely. Thanks, Jesse.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Before you stop this episode or hit the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast by Pebble. If you found this helpful, we'd greatly appreciate any awesome reviews and ratings on whichever platform you are listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast or the specific episode that may help them on their land investing journey. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.